There's been a few things where I've reminded myself to trust my past self.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, I think there's two things: is don't mortgage your future self too high, literally, figuratively and literally, and trust your past self because you probably thought about it quite closely then.
Now, I'm curious how construction has gone for you. You're obviously, at the tail end of it. You've been doing an amazing job of balancing, I think, sustainability, energy efficiency. You're wanting to have a home where you can age in place, make sure that it's super pragmatic and functional for you. You've been collaborating incredibly closely with your team. You've also spoken about your joy in quality and your desire to make sure that that was an important kind of approach to your project as well. How we spoke a little bit last time about some of those conversations about the flush thresholds, getting the seals right, making sure that the roof design was all right, and what the builder and the architect both did to upskill themselves in that. Have there been any hiccups and hurdles through construction, and how have you actually sort of structured and coordinated your communication with the builder? Are you going to regular site meetings? How is all of that sort of working and navigating when any challenge might have come up in the project?
So we haven't set. Well, I guess there's two things because we have. They send us a bill every month versus every milestone. I guess if you're on a different contract, so we always go through that meticulously. And when they send us the bill, have a list of here's what's pluses and minuses because we've had both in terms of the costs and how your budget's tracking, and then we often use that as the opportunity to have a conversation about time. So they gave us a Gantt chart at the beginning, which gave us the sequence for the whole build, really. Though that's been updated verbally rather than we've asked for an update.
I think it was updated once.
Yeah. But that's okay because that's been enough. So that's been the sort of money and time element. And then the quality element, we didn't set a regular site meeting, but we discuss what's coming up in terms of decisions. And sometimes we just want to go and have a look because we wanted to go have a look. And other times they would call us in. So obviously when the slab was laid, it was, come and have a good look at that. And we got Wendy, our architect, to come for that as well.
And that was the end of January, the slab went down.
Yes.
So.
Oh, and Parry, and something we hadn't even thought about or thought to ask, said, "Oh, come and have a look. I've just got them to build two prototype little brick walls with two different color grouts in it, so I can see what you think." And he wanted to do a more expensive finish on the garage walls. So it's really been there's been a bit of progress, or there's something we want you to look at, which has probably worked out every couple of weeks.
Probably on average, yeah.
Yeah.
And more so towards the end. So we were quite confident in letting them get on with things and not get under their feet. And I think that's been borne out.
Yeah.
So there haven't been too many problems. They had a couple of weather issues in the middle of the year, and they also wanted a couple more bodies than they had and had trouble recruiting them. So that dragged the schedule out a little bit. And at one point, one of the walls was slightly too narrow for a key bit of furniture, and they had to rebuild that. That wasn't a
big wall. Yeah.
Big wall. But there really haven't been too many issues.
And it was framing.
What was the framing stage? When they went to put the MHRVs in the ceiling, particularly the one at the front end of the house, it would fit where it was planned to fit, but then they couldn't attach anything to it, so they had to move it to the other end of that pavilion. So that was an example of a change, but that wasn't a change of scope, and it didn't affect any costs. They just had to rethink it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think.
And has Wendy gone out there at all without you, or is Wendy only ever there when you initiate it and get in touch with her?
She's been out occasionally to take photos, that kind of thing. But for her own interest.
And in terms of going out onto site, we haven't wanted to get underfoot, but there's never been any hesitation in us going there. So We had an unexpected visitor the other day with a couple of hours' notice, said, "Can I take a look at the place?" So I rang up the builder and he said, "Oh, of course, come on out."
Yeah.
There was absolutely no hesitation. So
Yeah.
and I think that's
Yeah.
partly because I understand we're not there every week with a white glove and a magnifying glass trying
Yes.
find faults.
And I think it's in contrast to the renovations we've done in this house, where we've lived in the house while it's been going on. But in both those cases, I've thought, yes, this would go pear-shaped if I wasn't looking at it every night and greeting them every morning.
Yes.
Whereas we've just had much more confidence in this process, which takes so much stress out of it.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to note, I think we said last time Parry, our builder, had to take some personal leave, and so he's handed over to Eugene, one of his two other partners, who's also absolutely lovely. And that was a bit of an intense week because it was short notice, but it's really been pretty seamless. There's been very little that's got dropped, and Eugene and Parry both did the pricing and signed the contract together with us, and Eugene did the framing. So he managed some of the very first bits of the build, and then Parry was managing the up to, we were pretty well at lock-up at that point.
Yep.
And they said as a company they'd sit down every evening and talk through any difficulties, issues, whatever they've had during the day. So that really showed in terms of, we lost a key person at one level, but they had enough depth to seamlessly hand that over.
I think what's really interesting is pointing back to what you said earlier about you had a 5 to 6 hour design meeting. How frequently?
Every 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks, and you had 43 pages of documentation and a 38-page selections schedule. To me, we talk a lot about how your ability to control what happens on site actually happens before you get to site with the documentation that you provide and the decisions that you make up front. And I can see that a lot of your, like the time that you're investing now is significantly less. And, it's not that thing of you feeling like you need to be on top of the builder or monitoring everything that they're doing, because you invested so much time and effort through that design phase to get, and also got all of that documentation in place. And so it's a really interesting study of your project's going to take time from you. Where are you best investing it in order to get the best outcome on, for the finished home and for the experience overall. And I can see, because you front loaded it and chose to invest it there, that's now paying dividends in construction being a much more.
Oh, absolutely. And you always say, and I say that from the other design work I do in my professional life, is, paper prototype, everything. And I think the other thing that really took a lot of the stress out too is Wendy, when we first started working with us, said to us, "I have a 3-week turnaround." So we just knew that was going to be the interval. And she sort of said to us a few times, "I don't know how people do it on a 1 or a 2 week," but in the home method Facebook group and so on, you so often see people who haven't heard from their architect for months or haven't spoken to their architect for months, and just having that that expectation really clearly articulated up front. And I think the other thing was, you got us ready for, and so did she, there'll be a number of other design consultants on the project. When she quoted, she had this list of, and here are the other consultants I'll use. And had we not done the home method, we might have thought, well, who are all these people? But we were expecting to see them, so that that helped, and also helped with the design, knowing what a reasonable design budget would be. And I think if we add all of the design budget up, it would still be well under 5% of the project.
Which is fantastic. That's
yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been interesting to understand how you've been utilizing Wendy through that design phase and for the interior design. And I think having her available at an hourly rate is a really great opportunity. I find that if architects, some architects, and we've spoken about this in Home Method, they'll insist on including contract administration in their fees because they want to be able to be your representative on site. And sometimes that can be a business decision for the architect because they feel that that's the only way that they can really protect the outcome of their design, which ends up being kind of their business card and their reputation in the project. But it's really great that Wendy's given you the flexibility of being able to utilize her hourly, and also obviously did a very good job of preparing for construction by having such a comprehensive set of documentation and selections and, having that all in place before construction began. And I liked your description of her reasonability in, sort of how she's thinking about how she's spending her time and where she can really add value to your process.
Oh, and she's really clear about, I don't think I could add value here, but I could here. But the other thing, I guess, is Pickleman's recommended their firm to us in the first place. We actually thought we were maybe going to get Wendy's partner, Claire, but we got very happy with Wendy. But her remark, because this was the first time she and Parry and Eugene had worked together, and she just said, "Oh, I just wish I could build every building with Parry." And he'd go, "Oh, she's so clever, and this is such an amazing design." So clearly there was some chemistry between them that really worked.
Yeah.
And she explained the contract administration option to us, and had we gone with our other close to final choice, we might have done that. But she was also saying the way Parry works, there's no point in the architect doing that. And but I think everyone's been very respectful of her design.
That's fantastic.
To administer it to do that.
Yeah. And so important when you've invested all that effort, time and money in getting the design right, that then there is that mutual respect during construction, so that you're not then faced with the builder going, "Hey, look, I think that this might work better. How about we change it? It'll be cheaper, it'll be faster, it'll be simpler, or it'll be better." And you forget all of the decisions that you made around that design because you can't remember absolutely everything that you've done over the last 12 months. You agree to it, and then it kind of then, as it starts to unfold, it looks different for how you expect it. And you go, "Oh, that's right. That's why we had that design decision in place. And I wish I'd remembered, because now what's happened is I don't really like the outcome as much." And, all of that kind of stuff. So it's great because you've obviously invested a lot in the design phase. You've got that locked away. You've become really informed about what the design represents. So you can be guardians of it, but you've also got a builder respecting that there's been a lot of intention, effort put into that design. So they're not going to suggest holistic changes to it unless, for example, a challenge comes up, or it's a detail kind of resolution, or, those kinds of things. It's just sounds really fantastic as a process.
Yeah, no, it's worked well. And there's been a few things where I've reminded myself to trust my past self.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, I think there's two things: is don't mortgage your future self too high, literally, figuratively and literally, and trust your past self, because you probably thought about it quite closely then.
We should put that on a T-shirt, Fiona,
Yes.
like front and back.
No, that's right.
And where the builder has suggested slight changes, they've been in sympathy and they've been in consultation.
Yes.
So one example was on the inside of the garage, above the garage door. It was going to be gyprock, and he looked at it and said, "I'm sure we've got enough spotted gum left over. Why don't we do that in spotted gum, not gyprock? It'll look better." And on the outside of the garage on one end and your study at the other end, he said, "How about we put an angle on the side of this brickwork? It'll just look that little bit."
Oh, and actually that
nicer.
was one of the things, because we've got a couple of bits of decorative brickwork that ended up with us just turning the bricks sideways so the Canberra stamp showed. And Wendy had designed sort of a horizontal line, and Parry looked at it and said, and he checked with her and said, "Is the fuse box going there?" And he realised we'd done this decorative thing that would point straight at the fuse box. And so he sort of said, "I'll do a square, and then and it did. It looks great." But
And another example was when he started doing the framing, and before they did the trusses, he looked at the line of the front between the roller door and the windows and the door, and thought about it and thought, no, I don't like the way that line looks. And again, in consultation with Wendy, said, look, if I bring this up and I bring this down, I think that'll look more integrated. And she agreed.
Yes.
And it meant that the truss design for the front pavilion had to change, and it meant that the ceiling height in our studies went up, in fact. But it was just him thinking, okay, I've got a design, I'm going to build it. Are we going to get what we want?
Yes.
And
Yeah, and he's building it in his head before you're
Yes.
building it on site, which just that,
Absolutely.
as a builder, I mean, it's what they're supposed to do, but it's quite interesting to see how rare it can be with builders to do that.
Well,
So
and
that mental coordination of all of the documentation,
Yes.
and then that manifestation visually of what it's going to mean.
And clearly he's done it a lot, but Eugene started out as a builder, but Parry actually started out as a plumber.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
But they're a very good team.
Can I ask you, I remember there was a point in Home Method where you asked about acoustic ceilings in the Facebook community. Can you remember what that was about? And
I can remember exactly what it was about.
Yeah.
And it was when we upgraded to the wooden floor, and we were standing on site, and we had Wendy, Parry, and Eugene was there that day. And we said, because Parry just looked so relieved when we went from engineered floor to wooden floor, I said, is there anything else that you think we should do quality-wise that we haven't done? And Eugene said, oh, I'm a bit worried about the noise level with the wooden floors in the main pavilion. Would you consider an acoustic ceiling? And we went round in circles, and that was really aesthetics versus practicality. And I was, I think, mucking around on the web, and we discovered the world of acoustic lighting. And so we now have these very big, bright orange chandelier things that'll be in the pop-up ceiling in the room that we think will work. But that was, we were all spinning our wheels, and Parry was suggesting the wood baffle ones, and then there's the commercial ones. And every time I went to, I'd go to different places for my work. So I'd be looking up at their ceiling. What have they got? So we were all spinning our wheels. And then finding these lights was the breakthrough. And then Pickleman's are building a new office for themselves, and they've now ordered the same acoustic lighting in a different colour.
Fantastic.
So
is the idea that the lighting, because of the shape and the design of it, it'll act as the sound baffle that'll break up some of that reverberation? Yes, that's awesome.
I think
it's a Melbourne company.
Yeah.
And they're recycled. So
yeah,
wow.
From recycled materials, and they'll recycle at end of life. So they're designed and built in Melbourne.
Okay. Do you remember the name of the company?
Yeah, Acoustico, I think. I'm just looking at their.
There are several companies, but
I think it's acoustic or Acoustico lighting. I'm just trying to read it on that website. Yeah, I think it is.
Oh, I'll be keen to see those and how that. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. So for those listening, they're like a ring with a pattern around almost a corrugation around the edge of them. And they're they're not dissimilar. There used to be in the Opera House, before they did all of the refurbishment inside the Opera House, there used to be donut lights and fixtures that were suspended over the stage that act as the acoustic kind of component.
And there's three of them in different sizes. They look a bit like industrial gears.
Oh, that's going to be really dramatic for that space as well.
Yes.
So that'll be really great to see. Awesome.
I'm glad that they had a whole range of good things.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh,
so
great.
We've gone from having a ceiling that would have been expensive to make and look a little bit industrial.
Commercial, yeah.
Got a statement about it.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is the perforated gyprock, a space with some acoustic dampening in, and then a second solid bit of a gyprock, 70 or 100.
And we would have had to have done, and that was because otherwise it would have mucked up the thermal performance.
Yeah. Well, it's essentially building a speaker cabinet in the ceiling too. But yes, we didn't want holes into the roof space.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that took quite a bit of circling.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that came to such a good resolution. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, can we talk a bit about the landscape design? You've touched on that. How has that sort of worked in terms of obviously arriving at somebody to work with, briefing them, getting that incorporated, and it now sort of being executed on site? Is it included? Is the builder is Parry going to oversee the execution of the
Yes.
landscape design as part of?
Or Eugene now, but yes.
Yep.
So it was quite a complicated process. So we had a quite renowned landscaper that Wendy, we got quotes from 2 or 3, and we worked with the one that seemed quite renowned, and she did a landscape design on our brief, and we just weren't quite happy. And she didn't have a very consultative style. And she had a price for an initial plan and then a price for the more detailed schedules and so on. And we got it quoted when we had everything else quoted by one of, I think Eugene had worked with the provider, but not Parry. And because we'd just had one of our fences done and it included the fencing, that was a pricing point that made it look very expensive, because the fencing was about two or three times the price of the length of fencing we just had done. But that's an interesting plot twist at the end. And we just weren't sure. And what we wrote into the contract with Parry was, if we made a decision about the landscaping within a reasonable time frame, that would be included in their management fee. And then Parry's suggestion was, wait till we've got at least the
window frames,
and the cladding and so on in, and then and one of the points of contention was there were quite high stone walls just outside our window, and Parry was going, you won't. Wendy was saying, I think they're quite nice, and Parry was going, you'll feel too closed in. So he was saying, let me prototype the height of those walls, particularly, and a few other things, and then you can make up your minds about what you want to do. And it took us longer to get to the point when we could have a landscape meeting than we thought, because of
the scaffolding stayed up a long time to finish off the cladding.
Yes, so
some of the brickwork. So yeah, that and a bit of weather-related delays.
Yeah. So by the time we got to that, Harry decided he'd get another contractor that he'd used with more often to come and have a design meeting with us. We decided we'd hire a different landscape designer for phase 2 and just try and fix this. There's just this real expanse of bricks right outside the living room to have veggie gardens on it that just didn't look right because it was north. And then we also hired a new landscape designer to do the schedules. And so we had this pivotal meeting. The landscaper brought along this beautiful, very expensive limestone pavers that he wanted us to use. Got a lot of paving for accessibility reasons. And Parry, in the meantime, would become convinced that we wanted a
gazebo.
Something like that. And so he'd gone and drawn this gazebo that we didn't like because it was too big as well. We all had a meeting, and then we really took to Michelle, the new landscape designer, and she went away and redrew the plans, or the south side bit of the garden that's got the oak tree in it could stay much as it was, but she redid the north side, including giving me a pacing circuit, which is something I really wanted.
Oh, fantastic.
And the other breakthrough was Parry saying, why don't you put all the veggie patches and herb garden off to the east so you don't see them, but so there's plenty of room. Yeah,
so there was northeast, it can be at the service end of the house, and then we had much nicer spaces to play with the decorative bit of the garden, and we brought the walls down to seat height so we could borrow the view from a park over the back fence, and it's just a much nicer, more flexible design. And then Parry's preferred contractor went and did a quote, and everybody had to sit down, largely based on he talked us into these lovely limestone pavers. And we're getting close to the 11th hour now, because I think this is October. This all happened.
Yeah.
And then Michelle, the landscaper, said, I've got a couple of people I've worked with, so just let me see what they think about the quantum of the quote. And we were saying, look, we won't, we can't guarantee them the work, but it'd be really handy. And one of them thought he could do it for much less, including the expensive pavers.
Yeah, and we're not showing them the other person's quote.
No.
It's just,
yes.
Yes. And anyway, and he said to Michelle, so can I quote? And he did the quote in 2 days, and he's available and we checked his reference. She's worked with him a lot, and we checked his references, and people were incredibly happy with him, including the guy who stages Floriade every year. He's his favourite landscaper in Canberra.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's a good endorsement, isn't it?
yep. So, though I did feel very sorry for our the first landscaper, because had he not upgraded the pavers, we probably would have
So are you still
gone
using
ahead
the
with our
limestone pavers, or are you using something else?
limestone.
Yep. Okay.
Tumble blue limestone. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had Trihex before that, and we have to have permeable pavers because of the tree plan.
Yes. Gotcha.
And the other thing Rick, the landscaper, did was he said, look, because we really emphasised the accessibility bit, and he said, look, let me order some of it and lay them so I can be really certain I can get these ones as flat as you want them to be. And so he sort of laid a metre of them, and he said, and I'll compress them on top of this. And then he said, if we have to, we'll go over it and just check there's nothing jutting out.
Just replace any high ones and so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
because they have about a 2 millimetre variation in thickness, which is quite startling.
yes. Or
Right.
just
Okay.
attach the front of your shoe on.
Yeah. Yeah. Which isn't great when it's all designed to be an accessible pathway. So it's
No, that's right. And
yeah.
it means that the pathways are wider in
Yeah.
case we're there on wheelie walkers
Yeah.
late
Gotcha.
in life. So yeah, so there were lots of plot twists, but on that first pricing point on the fence, the fencer did a great job, but took forever. Like, he kept on coming back and doing it in bits, which was one of the things that probably created more tension with our neighbours. And then one of our neighbours wanted a longer fence than we anticipated, so we got him to quote again after he'd finished, and he's gone bankrupt.
Oh, wow.
So that explains the great quality work, poor timing, and clearly quoting a bit too low.
Yes. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So
Yes.
wowzers. And so you're saying that you said that landscaping work's starting next week. Is that what you said?
I think is it next week or the week after?
It's
one
of
or
that
the other.
order.
Yeah.
It's mid-November.
Yes. And he had the time to do it, but he's also waiting on the limestone to arrive.
Gotcha. Okay. Are you going to seal the limestone?
Yes.
Yeah. And are you worried about that in terms of maintenance or anything like that?
I don't think so. And my main concern was slip.
Mm-hmm.
But he seemed to think it wouldn't affect that particularly.
Yeah. Have you looked at getting some test pieces done so that you can see because obviously there's different kind of sealants that you can use. Some can be penetrative, some kind of are more coatings. Have you chatted to him about doing some samples so that it doesn't,
no, but that's a good suggestion. And he's very cognizant of lowest maintenance possible, less slip possible.
Yeah.
And the painter was actually talking to us about the garage,
the epoxy
coating on the garage floor, and said the same thing. And he said, you've got the range of easy to clean. You're not going to break anything at one end. You're not going to break anything at the other end. And he said he'd painted an epoxy floor against his better wishes at a golf club recently. And he said, and then they had a spate of broken hips.
Oh, wow.
Hips and wrists.
Yes, hips and wrists.
That's not good.
So
how's everything feeling now? You're seeing all the spaces coming together and,
it's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. And there hasn't been any nasty surprises. So I did have a moment of thinking about the spare room cupboard doors today, because I think they might be opening a bit far compared to where the bedside table might be. But I think I might have taken the bed into account, but not the bedside table. But if that's the worst that's happened.
And all of the colours and finishes and everything like that, and the way the lights coming into those spaces, is that all feeling how you expected? Is it exceeding your expectations? How's that sort of been?
I think the living pavilion's exceeding expectations, as are our offices and the bedrooms. The laundry's darker than I thought, and the bathrooms are darker than I thought. Relatively, in the days of LED, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see once you get the electric lighting in and on what that sort of feels like in those spaces. And I think too, once all of the finishes in or all the paints on and you get that clean, that can also lift the feeling of the spaces as well. There's something about that can shift it slightly. So I'm really excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rick, the painter, was when we're looking at the ceiling colours for the laundry, he was going, "Oh yeah, you want to be able to see the stains in here, so we're just going to put a lighter colour on the ceiling than we have
See
in
the
other
stains.
places. We'll be at a quarter versus."
I love it.
So he's very conscious of that, certainly.
Oh, gosh. Well, you've had such a great experience of your project. You've clearly done it with a lot of intention. The collaborative nature of your project and the way that you've assembled a team who not only respect each other, but clearly respect and listen to you as the visionaries of this kind of, goal that you have for your lifestyle and for this home, I think is really to be commended in terms of how you've positioned yourselves to navigate this project well. Do you have any advice for anyone who is starting out, who is thinking about how they're going to invest, what they're going to make choices about, how they're going to go about their project, that you think would be valuable for them to understand at this point?
I think the main thing is just really allow enough time and money for design. Just don't undercut that. One, because it'll save you money, but two, it's going to, it just works better. And all the things about prototyping and understanding usability, we've got a rail running along the front of the kitchen bench so that our shorter friends can put their feet on it if they're sitting on stools, because we're quite long-legged. So, and
I love it.
so we were there on site with the cabinet maker and a chair that was at the average height of a stool, and Ed sat on it and Wendy sat on it because she's quite petite, and so we were all checking that. So it's that sort of, the think three times, cut once approach to life. So I think that's it. I think the relationship with the builders, if you get to the point where you're having to look at the contract all the time, that's when you're in trouble. So I think that thing about making sure you've got respect and keeping Wendy in the loop. What would you say, Ed?
I think we said earlier it's the 3 Ps. Listen to the podcast, plan and prototype.
Yes.
But certainly the relationship and the builder, we've been lucky. When Fiona gave the example that Perry had decided what the design solution was, and he'd drawn up this picture of a gallery sort of thing, and Fiona said, "No, I don't like it." It was just, okay, fine. Didn't have any pushback. It was, okay, where do we go next?
Yeah.
And they're all a bit like that. It's our egos are not the thing. It's you, the customer, and you, the architect, as the facilitator of the vision.
Yes. So. And actually that was and something for people who have accessibility things, and I'm not too bad at the moment, but we're building an accessible house, and then we didn't think, because they take so much soil out to do the foundations, then it's not a very accessible building site for me.
Oh, gotcha.
In terms
Yep.
of steps up.
A good observation. Yep.
And Harry's solution to that was he would always be running around, standing next to Ed, holding his hand out as well, as sort of going up these steps that were a bit high. But Eugene's solution was, we arrived on site the other day and he'd built a ramp, a temporary ramp.
I love it.
But it was, but I was thinking, in general, think about, we were able to be flexible about when we could go and see them, but not everybody would have that. But we'd also say to them, look, we've got a busy period coming up, so major decisions have to be brought forward or can't be made till after whatever date. So it's just that talk about your working arrangements, I think, is really important, both with the architect and the builder.
Yeah. I just love this conversation, Fiona and Ed. I think you've done such a tremendous job of navigating your project, and I'm so grateful for how generously you've spoken about the detail of it on the podcast, because I know it's going to be super helpful for those listening. I really look forward to getting you back when you've been living in the home for a while, because I think that it's always exciting to see when you have, my experience is when you've invested so much in the intention of the project, and taken that time in design, as you say, and then you've had a great experience of the construction process as well, even though there might have been hiccups and hurdles along the way, that then living in the house is this kind of regular reveal of the the fruits of your labor, basically. You know, it's this kind of testing it through the seasons, finding joy in these unexpected moments, or even seeing something deliver on that kind of conversation that you had back sort of, 3 months into the design phase of, well, in summer, then this can happen. And, in winter, this can happen. And I think it's such fun, in terms of that long-term experience of the home. So I look forward to getting you back and having that conversation with you. But I want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing your story, and for being such great Home Method members. It's been really great to be able to share your journey with those on the podcast, and I'm super grateful.
Well, I hope we've given back a small portion of what we've got out of it.
Yes, it's been a very great, useful resource.
Yeah, and you are so generous with the information that you give.
Oh, thank you. That's super kind of you. All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you really soon. And I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping that you can share some photographs as you're now at the pointy end in the Facebook community.
Will. Yes.
Yeah, that will be awesome to see. So cheers, Fiona and Ed. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.